And joining us now to talk about the issues at work here, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. He is the author, of course, of the Wall Street Journal bestseller Guilt by Accusation, along with distinguished university professor Touro College Thane Rosenbaum, the author of Saving Free Speech from Itself. So, Professor Dershowitz, let me start with you. We've got recounts going on. We have various lawsuits in different stages, and we have certification dates approaching. What do you think the president might have that would get traction in what you've observed legally?
Well, first of all, let me come to the defense of the president's lawyers. I got an email this morning asking me to sign a petition calling for their disbarment. There are tremendous pressures on the lawyers to withdraw from the case. This is pure and simple McCarthyism. I experienced it when I defended the president on the floor of the Senate and people tried to attack me. Fortunately, I'm not part of a law firm. The only people I have to take advice from is my wife and family, not my partners in my law firm. But all Americans should stand behind the right of lawyers to go to the mat for their clients and use all ethical, proper, legal means to try to achieve their result. Their goal is very simple. They're not trying to get 270 for President Trump. They're trying to deny 270 to Vice President Biden in order to get the election thrown to the House of Representatives where they can win. Do I approve of that tactic? That's not the question. It's constitutionally permissible. And if it's constitutionally permissible, the lawyers have an absolute right, indeed a duty, to press for it by trying to create the perfect storm, judicially, legislatively, by counting and recounts. That's what they're trying to do. That's part of the American way.
I did want to follow up with you, actually, Alan. I'll stick with you since you were just talking about it. In terms of deadlines, Bob and I were discussing this earlier. Not only do we have the elector, their deadline, which will be December 14th, as we mentioned, we also have that December 8th deadline for all of these lawsuits and recounts and all of that to be resolved. That seems like it would be cutting it very close. First of all, how could that possibly happen? And if it doesn't happen, then what?
Well, first of all, those deadlines are not realistic deadlines. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that they have a plausible lawsuit about the computer glitches. Let's assume they have evidence. We hear it from Sidney Powell. I've heard it from others. I haven't seen the evidence, but hypothetically, let's assume they have the evidence. They bring a lawsuit, and the judge says we have to take evidence. We have to have a trial. The judge will have that trial. The judge will be influenced by the deadlines of the safe harbor and the electoral college, but the strategy of the Trump team is to let the cases go forward so that the Secretary of State, who might be a Republican in some states, won't certify the electors. And then when it comes for the day that the electors vote, if there aren't enough electors to give Biden the 270, it goes to the House. That's the strategy, so that although there are deadlines, the deadlines cut both ways. They cut against the Trump administration in the sense that they have to get in their lawsuits quickly, but they might cut against Biden if the lawsuits legitimately go beyond the constitutional deadlines. This is a very complicated area.
Flexibility.
Thane, let's talk about what is at work here that might actually undo the results or the presumed results in multiple states. Do you see something gaining traction? There are allegations against this voting system in various locations. What do you see that actually may result in taking away some electoral votes?
Machine issue arises because there was, in a number of the lawsuits, deemed insufficient evidence that showed fraud or the improper counting of ballots, either through hearsay evidence or insufficient evidence. If you're attacking the voting machines and that they could be hacked, you don't have to worry about the direct evidence because, frankly, the Trump campaign wasn't able to produce a witness who said, I saw 6,000 ballots improperly counted. Or I myself, through ballots that were unverified, bad signatures, undated, I tossed them in and they were counted. There's no evidence for that. So that's where I think you're seeing this new argument about the machines. I don't know if Alan would agree with this, but Newsmax, in my mind, is the only network that's focusing on the constitutional issue. I know that I've spoken about it a number of times. I still think that there's an argument there, which is in Pennsylvania and perhaps some of the other battleground states, was it constitutionally improper for state election officials or courts to have rewritten their election laws and extended the deadline, period. Mm-hmm. We have a number of Supreme Court justices, beginning with Justice Alito and Kavanaugh for sure, who see that this is problematic, that it's only state legislators that can change those deadlines. Now, I don't know if the Supreme Court's going to hear this case. It's still under review. But if there are more than, let's say, 75,000 ballots in Pennsylvania that were counted after the late arriving ballots, after the deadline, that were actually added to the tally, if you subtract 70% of them, because that's what seat for Vice President Biden receiving, then you can overturn the election. But look, we just don't know how many ballots and whether they actually counted.
Yeah, Alan, very quickly.
I agree with that. I agree both that Newsmax has been the only station that has been analyzing this constitutional issue carefully, objectively, and neutrally. And I also agree that depending on the numbers, the Pennsylvania case is the strongest one because we already have at least one justice and perhaps justices and a precedent from Bush versus Gore that will incline the court to favor the Trump legal team in the Pennsylvania vote. Pennsylvania alone will not be enough to deprive the vice president. He needs 36 electors to be attracted.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, so people know, would be 20. Would be 20.
You then have to put together an inside flush, which is going to be a very difficult inside straight. Sorry for my poker mistake, but that is very difficult to do. But I certainly don't blame the lawyers for trying. That's their job.
Yeah, and it's their right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Alan Dershowitz and Thane Rosenbaum, thank you so much for joining us.